back in the think tank in Sewell, New Jersey. And my name is Vinny, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
And I'm Sam, alcoholic and an addict. And it is just the two of us this afternoon. No guest for you, but I think there's been a bit of something I've wanted to talk to him about for a while, something our host kind of does that we don't really touch on enough on the podcast, and that is intervention. The process of embracing loved ones to seek help when need be. And my co-host here, Vinny Sarasso, is a licensed certified interventionist. And it's kind of crazy. I find we don't bring that up enough, even when we bring other guests on. This is how long you've been doing interventions for?
Since probably about 99, I think. 1999.
And you're a license. What's the license that you carry? A CIP,
it's more
right?
of a board registration.
Yeah.
It's not a license.
It's not a license. Okay.
Yeah, there's several that I carry.
Well, it's funny. Just through being sober and working in the field, the word intervention gets thrown around so casually. Like, I'll talk to a guy in a 12-step program, and he'll say, "Yeah, I'm going to do an intervention," and I'll go, "No, you're not going to do it. You're not an interventionist.
You're 12-stepping.
You're going to 12-step somebody." Please don't throw that word around so casually, because I think it does. People watch the show on A&E. It's a huge show. People love to watch it. It looks one way when it's really kind of something much different than that. And
Do you know that they actually tape 2,000 hours total for a 1-hour show?
For each episode?
1,999 hours ends up on the cutting room floor. They have like 30 sets of cameras out there following the addict, following the family members.
Yeah.
It's not reality. It is
not
not reality. It is, and you're right. The term intervention is thrown around so much, but to do interventions, you have to have a decent amount of training. We could talk about the training later on.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you just get a call from a family and say, "Okay, well, I'll be over tomorrow." Like, if you want me to do an intervention tomorrow, I'm not doing it for all the tea in China, because if you do it wrong, if you screw it up, you can mess up a family's relationship.
Definitely.
It's already bad with the addict or the alcoholic that you're trying to intervene on. You'll make it worse with the rest of the family if you rush into an intervention. That's why it takes planning. You can't do an intervention the next day. It's just, you have to educate all the intervention participants on what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do, where we're going to meet. There's so many things that go hand in hand with preparing for an intervention.
I've always thought of an intervention to be kind of that of sort of like a puppet master, because what they do is it's so much of it is family education and educating the family of how to embrace their loved one to kind of force the outcome that they want, which is their loved one seeking help for what they're struggling with. But I'm really interested to hear about this from your perspective as someone who's been doing it for upwards of like 20, almost
over 25 years,
25
I guess.
years.
24, 25 years.
Just to the bare basics to the listeners that may not be as educated in it, what is an intervention?
An intervention basically is, and I hate to use a word that you're defining, but you're intervening on someone's bad behavior, whatever that behavior might be. You can do an intervention medically, like on some overweight person that has wicked diabetes. You're intervening on their bad behavior because they don't want to get in shape. They don't want to eat properly and all that good stuff that will help you, maintain a good, healthy blood level, whatever. So anything you do when you're it's like you're throwing up a stop sign in someone's face and you're saying, "Hold on, we need to talk about what you do and how unhealthy it is," basically.
Well, it's kind of like, in the work, in 12-step work, there is a line that says we sought divine intervention, right? Which
Sure.
is essentially power greater than ourselves coming into play to change or force our thinking differently. So the word is, it's essentially, for you, it's contracting a third party to come into a family to help assist the family with getting their loved one to seek help. So why don't you tell me like a little bit more about what this careful planning you speak of looks like?
Well,
Like
let's
early
take it-
stages
yeah,
from
let's take
start
it-
to finish.
Take it from the initial phone call.
Yeah.
Someone calls me up. That's the initial caller. They say, I think my family member needs an intervention. So at that point, I tell them, tell me why you think they need an intervention. Because I've had parents tell me, well, I'm catching my son smoking weed. I'm like, okay, well, how often? Oh, well, I caught him twice in the last month and a half. I'm like, well, yeah, that you don't qualify for an intervention. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like, have you even talked to him? Is it almost like the family's too scared to broach the subject with their loved ones?
Sometimes, because
have they
here's
even
the
done
thing.
that in the first place?
Here's the thing. Addicts use anger to keep people at bay so they could keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
You may approach a family member and confront them about drug use or this or that, and they may like explode. And so, the average response is, whoa, okay. If I just back off, he'll stop screaming at me.
Right.
And he said he wouldn't do it again. Okay, that's the average response. So an addict or an alcoholic uses that anger and that emotion to keep their family members at bay so they don't have to stop doing it.
Right.
But I always ask, what led you to believe or leads you to believe your family member has a problem with drugs or alcohol? And you have to prove it to me.
Right.
Because this isn't a process that you use on anybody. Like if you're in this just for the money, you're in the wrong industry.
Definitely.
And you're going to ruin people.
Yeah.
But if you prove to me that they need an intervention, then we'll start the process. And proving to me is, he drinks a bottle of vodka a day.
It's
Okay, that's cool.
qualifying their disease, essentially.
Yeah, they have to qualify their disease because, again, if you're that kid that smokes weed on Friday night, we're not doing an intervention on you. I will help you approach your son or daughter or whatever and tell you what to say and tell you how to I could do that on the phone.
Yeah.
Like I just do that for whoever calls me. But but I'll tell you what to say and do.
And just provide education to the
Right.
family, because that's really what it is. So,
yeah. But as far as the process, once they prove that they need an actual intervention, a formal intervention, then I say, okay, let's move to the next step.
and what's that look like?
The next step is choosing participants for this intervention. We need a team. We need an intervention team. So basically, I tell them, put together a list of people that love this person and care for this person, and don't limit the list. Because people say, oh, well, what do I need? 4 or 5 people? I'm like, no, I've done interventions with everywhere from 2 to like 20 people and everywhere in between.
20 people.
You have to understand the addict or the alcoholic needs to see that so many people love them and care for them because they feel real alone now. Otherwise, why would they be doing what they're doing, right? We abuse drugs and alcohol for different reasons.
Yeah. And the team is more often than not like direct family.
I always say we start from the inside and work our way out.
Okay.
If you come from a family where you have 4 brothers and sisters and 2 parents, and like two of the sisters are married, well, now you have 4 siblings plus 2 in-laws.
Yeah.
That's 6 plus the parents are 8. Now, do you have any good friends left? You may not.
Right.
Do you have any aunts and uncles that know what's going on? So all of a sudden, the list balloons to 10 or 12.
Okay.
The 20 number, that never happens. Seldom. Like I said, I've done them, and the same thing goes with doing them with 2 people. Those were the only 2 people in the world that could have participated.
Yeah.
And it was successful. Why?
that's good.
Because we took our time and we did everything in my process. And that's why it worked.
Right.
But after I tell them, don't make a list and call the people and ask if they want to participate. Make the list and call me back and I will qualify each person on the list to participate.
So that's what it looks like. So you direct phone caller, we acquire the list, and then you go through your process of calling each
No.
Oh, no, you don't do that.
I tell people how to make the list of people.
Yeah.
They call me back, and I go through that list with the caller.
Okay.
Everybody on the list has to qualify to be on the list to participate.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I say, look, if you're gonna include your alcoholic aunt that hasn't stopped drinking yet, we can't have her because it's like the pot calling the kettle black.
Right.
You know, if you're, taking pain medication for the past 5 years and you have a tendency to abuse it, well, guess what? You can't play. It's like the pot calling the kettle black. So I go through each one, and usually the list is just fine because I prep them beforehand. Then I basically say, okay, we qualified all these 10 or 12 people or whatever. Now call them and see if they want to do this and swear them to secrecy. You can't tell my son.
You bring them in the inner circle.
There's an inner circle, and you have to trust the people that you're inviting to this intervention because they
could ruin the whole thing.
They can ruin the entire thing.
Have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever had a loved one or somebody in this inner circle on this list kind of slip to the loved one that this was coming?
No, not that I can remember. Although during the intervention, I've had people kind of cross the line.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Definitely.
Because when we form this intervention team, it's a team. And it's a team that's trying to save the life of a loved one.
Right.
Now, if we're midway through this intervention and you jump to his aid, you have now crossed the line into the party that's trying to actively kill this person.
Yes.
And I word it that way, and they say, oh, I get it. It's life and death. You get one shot at this. So you need to make it count.
Right. And you need to paint them a very clear picture that when they do cross that line, they sacrifice the entire mission.
100%.
The entire motive of why we're here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I let them know basically that we are a team and we have one goal, and that's to help your loved one get into treatment and get his life back.
So so the list is made. You've qualified the list. Do you bring them all together ahead of time?
Now, the next thing I do is I tell the caller, make sure they all want to participate because it's not for everybody. They usually all do. And then I say, ask them when they're free to meet with me.
Okay. Individually?
No, all at the
All
same
together.
time. I
Got
educate everybody at the same time. If you can't be there, we Zoom them in or we speakerphone them in. No problem. That initial meeting lasts about 90 minutes or 2 hours, sometimes even longer, depending on the questions and things like that. But there's once we come up with when everybody's free, then we plan this meeting and I go out to wherever the meeting is. Now, the meeting has to take place at somebody's home.
Yeah.
We can't have it in a diner because we can't sit in a diner for 2 hours and not order anything.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's also not private.
Yeah.
So the initial caller usually says, well, where should we have this? I'm like, anywhere the addict or alcoholic is not going to be. If that is at your home, let's say they live outside the home, we'll do it in your home. How likely is he to come home? Oh, well, he stops in every night. Okay, we can't have it at your house. How about your sister's house or one of your other kids'
One of
homes?
the other participants.
Somebody will have it. Somebody will host it.
that.
So I'll go out there and educate them on addiction and the whole process of intervention, my process of intervention. And it's been wildly successful, my process. Like I always tell you, it's mine and mine alone.
I can attest to that as well, having used you on a couple interventions over the years. I've always been interested in this part, given that meeting, right? The initial team meeting, the first educational part of it. Do you find as an interventionist that, aside from the bad actors that we talked about before, maybe the alcoholic aunt or somebody that still actively uses, do you ever find that in that initial meeting, you can start to see who's going to cause problems from like an enabling perspective?
Well, I go in there and I basically say, I'm running the show here. Okay. Not trying to sound like a jerk, but we do everything my way. There's no enabling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like the education starts at that initial meeting and it runs for, like I said, probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, but we focus on all that stuff, enabling, things like that. And I tell people, hey, look, I don't care if you've enabled this person in the past. That's in the past. That's yesterday. Forget about it.
Yeah.
If you enable him from this day forward, now you're trying to kill him. So that, like I usually get like some wide eyes, like, whoa, did he really say that?
You have to.
You have to be upfront with them and tell them your expectations.
I say it all the time as well when I talk to families, like you're letting somebody under your roof actively risk their life every single day. I say it all the time. The single greatest thing my mother ever did was when I was 17 years old, told me that I could no longer live in her house if I was going to live the way I was living. And you know what? That came at the advice of a licensed professional.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
She didn't just wake up one morning like, I got to get Sam out of my house.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Even though she probably wished I would. She loved me. She didn't want to throw me out of her house. But she said, at this point in time, if you're going to act this way, you can no longer live here. And that's pride. I didn't get sober the next day.
Right.
I didn't even get sober the next year. But I eventually did get sober, and I would imagine it's probably because of that.
It could be. That's called a consequence of your continued path.
Right.
And the consequences, we don't get into the consequences until the intervention is over. And when the actual intervention is, it could take hours, could take half a day that we're in there doing this. And you have to outlast the addict, basically. And I'll get into the steps of my interventions shortly. But basically, the final thing before we all walk out the door and we just cannot convince this person to go to treatment is I ask everybody all the participants, what happens now? And I already schooled them on this at this initial meeting.
Right.
If we get to this part, which we seldom get to that part, usually it's like 1 or 2% of the interventions go to the consequence phase.
Right.
And the consequence phase is, what are you going to do if they keep doing drugs and or alcohol or whatever it is you're trying to do here?
Yeah.
And they basically say, well, okay, if you're going, because I've schooled them on this, and I say, okay, if you're going to continue doing drugs, you're not going to do it up in your bedroom. You have to go today, right now.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about the consequence phase is not everybody's going to have them. You may have them. Your wife may have them. A couple of the sisters may have them. But if you got an aunt and uncle there's no consequences you could put on that nephew or whatever.
Right. They don't have enough influence.
But
in
if
the
you're
life.
married with children, maybe that addict loves the heck out of those nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I can't have an addict around my niece and my children. So now you're like, whoa, you mean I can't see my niece and nephew? Nope. I don't want you in my house. I don't want you near my house. Nothing. Because at that point, you have to treat the addict the way you need to treat an addict. Would you want them around your kids if they're actively using? Of course not.
No. Yeah.
And you just don't want that. Your loved one is buried deep inside the shell of what you're looking at. We're trying to free that person. So basically, you have to talk to that person at the end of that intervention like they're the addict that they are, basically. Yeah. So the consequences are what makes people change their behavior.
Right.
Nobody ever changes anything without consequences. I would have never stopped drinking and using drugs if it hadn't have been for legal consequences. I worked. I was a full-time college student. I never missed work. I just kept getting in trouble with the law.
Yeah.
That's what So that's a consequence to my continued pathway. That is a judge put up a stop sign in my face and said, here's what you're going to do, or you don't have to, basically. But if you want to avoid, a bad, rough road, then you're going to do what I tell you.
It's funny that, don't you look back on that as more of like an opportunity now?
I do now. I actually wrote my lawyer, who became a judge in Philly, and the judge who was presiding over my final case, I wrote them thank you letters on my 20th sober anniversary for doing what they did.
Yeah.
And then I actually contacted the judge who lives in Denver now, retired a long time ago. And I thanked him for what, and he obviously didn't remember me after 30, I think it was 35 years at the time. Of course, he didn't remember me, but I thanked him and I told him what he did and how he did it. And, so
who you are today. As a result.
Like you said, as the opportunity, it's an opportunity to straighten out your life. And I've done interventions on people where, I still call them successful, although they didn't go to treatment that day. They went to treatment the next day.
Yeah, or a week later or something like that.
Because sometimes you have to spend, 3 days on the street with no money, nowhere to go. It's pouring rain, and you look up to heaven and you ask God, oh my God, I didn't know it was like this.
Yeah.
And you ask for help. I had one girl who basically we did the intervention. It was on a Sunday. It was, it took a while. She finally stormed out of the room. Basically, we were giving her these consequences and she'd like, yeah, okay, see ya, I'm out. And she left. And it was 7 days later that her mother reached out to me and said, she's ready.
Nice.
And I said, okay, what's she been doing? She's living in her car right now. She has a car. There's no gas in it.
Consequences.
So it's a consequence.
Yeah.
It's when your back is up against the wall, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I'm going to call my mother, say I'm sorry, and do whatever I need to do.
You better hope that mother holds her boundary,
Well, that's where the education comes in.
That
I tell people, I'm your interventionist. You can call me a year from now if, God forbid, something goes haywire or they relapse or whatever. So I put myself out there, not just for the intervention, for that week where we're planning the intervention, we do the intervention, they go into treatment. I tell them, call me next month if you have a question. Call me 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever. I still have a guy that calls me every anniversary. My anniversary is August 15th, which happens to be a Catholic holy day. And that's why he remembers to call me. He calls me every day for the past 10 years.
No way.
I helped out one of his family members, and every August 15th, I look forward to this guy calling me, and we have a brief conversation, and it's every single year. And I admit, the first couple years, I couldn't remember who he was.
Yeah, you told me about that.
I was like, holy crap.
How do I know this guy?
It was what the heck? And it was like a call from Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
It was crazy.
That's something
else, how'd this guy from Alaska get my phone number? Well, this guy actually flew in for the intervention.
No way.
And
and he calls you every year on your anniversary.
He's from maybe 30 minutes from here.
Okay.
So he's from Delaware County, which is right outside Philadelphia for all you listeners. Basically he calls me and that's great. But I tell people all the time, you could call me, no problem.
So what's back to the process? I feel like we can get really off topic sometimes.
Sure.
We can go on about this forever, but next step of the process after that initial meeting, the blueprint, right? As you lay the blueprint with the team, as you're calling it, what's it look like after that?
One of the focus points of the meeting is what you're going to say and how you're going to say it to the addicted individual. So we do that, and this is the only part that resembles that goofy show on A&E.
Okay.
I call it the letter reading phase. And it's a very loving and caring phase to the intervention. You're pouring your heart out. Now, I hear the term impact letter, quote unquote, all the time. And when I hear that, I always ask, well, what's an impact letter? And they're like, you want to write a letter to your loved one that's addicted. I'm like, oh, well, what's the letter say? Well, I don't know. You pour your heart out. I'm like, no, that's not how it's done. You want to do it properly? Okay, let's go over how we do it properly. And basically, that letter to your family member, you have to remember, you have to remind the addicted individual that he's a good person.
Yeah.
So the top 3/4 of that letter has to be very positive. Remind the person what they were before addiction set in.
Or like the quality of their relationship and what it looked like before that, right?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
It's like, it's everything you could think of. Think of a eulogy. This is a living eulogy.
Got it.
That you're telling some person how you feel, what you guys did when you grew up, what it was like, what kind of a nephew he is, what kind of a brother or sister he is. If you're his best friend, what kind of a friend he is prior to addiction.
Okay.
The bottom quarter of the letter has to be filled with why we're there. It has to be filled, you have to transition the letter from the positive to the negative. And that basically is, and then things started to happen.
And now
I noticed this. And examples of that would be like if the addicted individual ran over the neighbor's mailbox when they were hammered or high or whatever. You wouldn't normally do that. But when you're high or drunk, maybe you did.
Yeah.
So that would be something that would be written at the bottom of the letter. Basically saying you were high and you did this. Or if you got into a fight with your father, you were drunk, you were high, whatever. But the thing is with these letters, they have to be written in the first person. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen.
Okay.
It's almost like a court of law. You have to, like, the addicted individual is the jury, and the prosecutor is everybody sitting around.
Wow.
And we have to prove
and
to
you're
the jury.
The judge. Yeah.
And I'm the judge.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to prove to that jury that this guy's guilty of being an addict or an alcoholic and needing help.
You almost have to isolate the disease and put it out on the table so everyone can see it so clearly.
And all those letters that are written, no one shares them with the next person. I literally email out 3 or 4 letters from previous interventions to the participants so they could see what I mean by the top half being positive, the bottom third of it being negative, or quarter of the letter being negative. And then at the end of the letter, you can say whatever you want. Like, I hope you take this as our love for you and our concern for you. And we want to see you better. And hopefully you'll agree to go to treatment. And basically they send me the letters prior to the intervention. I read every one and I make sure it's not offensive. And you're probably thinking, why would a family member
How could that be offensive? Yeah.
To their addicted individual? Well, it could be, you could use the word drug addict in your letter or junkie in your letter. And that's like a curse word to somebody that hasn't admitted it yet.
Right.
So I would change the wording to your issue with drugs or your issue with alcohol.
Or your continued drug use. Yeah.
That softens the blow, but it's the same exact meaning. You don't want to offend somebody in the letter. Phase 2, we could take care of that because phase 2, it's everything you didn't want to say at the bottom of your letter.
Right.
Like the embarrassing stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we go around and we read these letters. And then after the letter, I basically give the addicted individual an opportunity to address anything that was said. Because that's fair. If I'm going to sit here and read you a letter and tell you all the good things and bad, you should be able to address it. And if it's written in the first person, they usually just sit there and just nod and say, no, you're right. I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, there's nothing they can say to that.
Because if you write down what someone else saw and they told you, they'll challenge you on it.
Right.
You weren't there. I didn't hit any mailbox. What are you talking about? So now we have an argument. Now the interventionist has to step in and say, wait a minute. Are you denying that happened? Whatever. Yeah, your mother saw you. She didn't put in your letter. Whatever. But so now I got to take time to get everybody back on track.
Right.
That's why make it a first person letter. That only applies to you. Doesn't apply to anybody else in the group.
So then post letters. How long?
Post letters, that's a conversation.
Right.
After the letters are read, we'll give the addicted individual a minute to, or however long he needs, to address anything he wants or anyone. And they usually don't take that opportunity to say a whole lot because the letters are written in the first person. They're true. There's no misstatements because I've read them. And they're good letters and they don't have anything to say. So at that point, I'll step in and say, okay, you heard everybody's message. You see what some of them wrote at the very end. You know what's going on here, right? And they usually say, yeah. And so, okay, let's talk about treatment. So now the conversation moves from intervention to treatment. And
do you
they
get them
never
to
agree
admit
right away.
Do you
Never.
get them to admit that they need treatment first?
Well, the letters all say what they're doing. So you're going to need treatment. If you're shooting
Right.
dope, you need treatment.
Yeah.
If you're drinking a bottle of vodka a day, you need treatment.
You need detox,
So
right?
you need a, yeah. So, and I'm not one of those guys who just goes for detox. Like if you're going to get treatment,
No, you're going to full treatment. I'm saying, but
residential. Oh yeah.
you need to go into detox.
Oh
is
yeah,
what
no
I'm
doubt,
saying. Yeah.
no doubt. So at that point, we start talking about you going into treatment, not the intervention. We're done with that. Now it's, let's do this. What do you say we do treatment? We get in today. I have a bed ready for you. And that's the thing. A lot of these quote interventionists, they won't even secure a bed. Like, well, how do you get, now the person agrees to treatment and you don't have a bed ready?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
You always line up the
You
bed
have
ahead
to
of
have
time.
a bed lined up from days before.
From like a week before sometimes.
I like to just know it's secure
Right.
and my name's on it. So basically, that's the conversation that follows. And they always say, like, I don't need it. I don't do as much as you say. Like, so, okay, here's our standpoint. Now we, I hate to use the word argue, but we discuss why you think you don't need treatment. When they're finding empty bags of heroin on your bedroom floor, you know, you need treatment. So let's talk more about that. Why do you think you don't need it? You know, and then they'll give some half-assed response,
Right.
and I'll address it, and everybody else. And again, this is a very calm, caring, and loving process. Our voice, like my voice right now, is louder than it should be for an intervention.
Right.
Because you have to think of it like a therapeutic setting. If you're sitting across from a therapist, they're not talking as loud as I am, waving my hands around in the air. You know, like that's just how I talk because I'm Italian. I talk with my hands, whatever.
You do, yeah.
Talk loud, whatever. But when I'm doing an intervention, I'm acting kind of like a therapist. I have my voice is steady, it's even keeled, and we're just having a conversation.
Okay.
And then if the person really doesn't want to go, we keep talking about it. We don't just say, okay, same time next week. All right, see you then. No, we go until we break down that barrier of resistance.
And a lot of the times, if they're agreeable, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, you are the one to drive them in, right? You usually put them in the car and bring them to treatment, I feel like a lot of the time. Just to ensure.
I used to do that all the time.
Right.
Now I arrange for a driver
Transport.
from the treatment center
Right.
or something to that effect. And I do that because I have driven many people to treatment.
Yeah.
And it's just for insurance purposes. If I get into an accident with you, you'll take everything. I could take my house if we're really hurt. So, and my lawyer basically told me, you don't ever want to put anybody in your car. If you put a female in your car, they may accuse you of something, whatever. You just need to be, and I know plenty of people in the program that say, nope, I'm driving them in anyway. Okay, that's totally up to you. You could keep doing that. I just choose not to do it. However, I arrange for a ride so we are not lacking the day of the intervention. Even if I can get a family member, I will literally drive behind that family member until they get dropped off at a treatment center if I choose one that's local.
Right.
If we choose one that's out of the area, which usually I prefer during an intervention, so they can't walk out and go home.
Correct.
You know, so I kind of like to choose something a little bit further from home so that their friends can't come, their so-called friends can't come and pick them up.
That makes sense. So in thinking about a lot of these cases, right, there's this window, having worked on an intervention with you in the past, I'll just say that. There's this window of time, we just discussed it, between post letters, you know, the loved one, the addicted, kind of admitting what's going on, and then them committing to treatment. That to me always seems to be the largest window of time. It takes up about 75% of it because realistically, I feel like the letters, the loved ones all coming together, telling the
That's
addicted
about
how they
45
feel,
minutes maybe.
give or take. And then there's more often than not another 3 hours, right?
There could be like several more hours.
I've seen you do
because
them
you
that
have
were
to
6 hours
You
before.
have to convince them. You got to wear them down and convince them that this needs to happen, or things are going to happen that you don't like so much.
Do you find that more often than not they say, "Oh, I'll go"? They always set a different time point on.
Oh yeah,
it.
like tomorrow. I'll go tomorrow.
I'll go tomorrow. Yeah,
I'm
or I'll
like,
go next Tuesday.
I'm like,
because
nah,
I have to
we're
go.
Gonna, we're not going to do that. You're not going to go out and get high one last time and possibly die waiting for this treatment.
Yeah. You've already admitted that you need help.
Yeah.
You've committed to it.
So
what's
let's do
the
it.
difference between today and tomorrow?
Exactly.
There is none outside
the
of you
difference
being.
is they want to get high one more time.
Of course.
And
yeah.
sometimes that ends their life.
Or
believe
run
it or not.
away. Yeah.
Or they want to run away. But here's the thing. Even if you run away during, let's say, midway through an intervention, or you get aggravated because we're in our third hour or whatever, trying to convince you, and you walk out, like, I want somebody to stand in front of the door just for 10 seconds. So I can tell them, if you walk out that door, they are not letting you back in, and there will be consequences for this choice
that you've made. Right.
that you are making as we speak.
And then let's get into that a little bit. You know, on the slight chance that they are completely resistant to help and treatment, what then?
Well, basically, there could be a time, if we get to that point where they're not going to treatment. If we get to that point in time, I basically tell the group, what are your consequences for him not going? And those consequences could be, you're not living here anymore. You're not going to see your nieces and nephews anymore. You're not going to use your car that I pay for and is in my name.
Right.
Like you're literally on your own. By the way, go up and pack a bag, take only what's yours, not what I bought you, and leave. Like, these are harsh, but it's the only way that you're going to convince someone that we're finished. We're finished supporting the addict. Now, if the person buried inside you wants to come back, that's the person we want to see. That's the person we want to get better, not the addict that's in front of us that is denying everything. So take what you own and get out.
I feel like knowing the addicted and being, recovered, I feel like in those moments in time, I'm just going to strive to keep control over the situation as best I can. So I'm going to try to nickel and dime you every chance I can to just force some sort of control. Even if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I'll say, I'm going to go upstairs and take a nap. I'll go at 4:30.
It's not happening.
No.
And here's the thing,
and you probably get that all the time.
Not the nap so much.
No, but people striving for control.
They just want control. That's right.
They're reaching for control of the situation.
I did an intervention on a. I've done so many. I have stories about so many
of course,
things.
We should definitely.
I have one that the person just didn't want to go to treatment. They were on the board of directors of this major company.
No way.
Yeah, and him and a few of his friends came up in this organization together. And they're literally on the board of directors of this publicly traded company, believe it or not. And the guy was very, very, very good at his job.
Right.
Like, he was very good at his job.
White collar executive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when he came home, it was over. He was just drinking till the next day, got up, boom, right back to work. 10-hour day, come home, same thing.
Wow.
So it was going so well. Loving, caring. This guy was one of the nicest people you'd want to meet, but he had a wicked drinking problem. So I always say, in this phase 2, where you're out of the letter phase and you're just trying to convince him to get treatment and you're bringing up stuff that isn't in your letter. You know, we're only going to talk about 2 or 3 things in your letter, the bottom of your letter, the bad stuff.
The bad stuff.
We're going to leave the rest, you know, in our pocket. If we need it, we can get it out. So this guy was married about 30 years at the time. And his wife, you could see the look on her face. Love turned to hate. I mean, she just was just done with this guy. But I convinced her, like, hey, let's give it one more shot. You've been with this guy 30 years. You have loving kids. Let's just do this process with us. She, okay, no problem. So we go through the process. And again, I tell you not to put the real embarrassing stuff at the bottom of the letter. So she stopped the intervention on a dime. She said, why don't you tell everybody here why we throw out your sofa in your study once every other week? He said, I'll go. So I'll go right now.
No way.
I said, hold on a second. What's going on with the couch in the study? I knew exactly what was going on.
What?
He was like losing control of himself after he got so shit-faced drunk.
Okay.
And was peeing all
over the couch.
So when that happened, they would get rid of the couch and bring a new one in, and they would make an excuse. Oh, that one's not good for Dad's back. That one doesn't go with the decor. They would just come up with, and they did this like 6, 7, 8 times in the past, 6 months or whatever. Like, it was terrible.
That's a couch a
so
month.
The guy says, I'll go. No problem. I'll go. He didn't want that
He
revealed.
was so shameful
He was
about
so
the couch.
ashamed of that. He didn't want that revealed. So I said, what do you mean you'll go? Wait, what is this thing about the couches? And he got upset. I said, I'll go. And I said, okay, that's fine with me. No problem. Let's pack a bag. He said, okay, let's pack a bag. And then the wife, she was so, like I said, love turned to hate after all these decades of abuse, of, alcohol abuse, that she said, well, you know what? He gets so shit drunk that he loses control of his bowels all over the chair. We got to throw it out. And he was just like completely embarrassed by that. And at that point, I kind of felt sorry because he did agree to go.
Yeah.
But she just had to get that off of her chest. And I didn't know she was going to kind of throw that out there. I thought she was going to shut it down just like I shut it down. But she got it out there. But that's an example of something that will force someone to go to treatment because they're embarrassed by it.
It's ego stuff. It's a threat to the ego. It's shame.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's a lot of shame. But
ego.
the thing is, if you sat there and didn't bring that up, he would have never gone to treatment.
It was the couch that got him to go.
There wasn't enough that everybody was bringing stuff up, and that wasn't enough to embarrass him or shaming him, whatever, to go into treatment. So basically, that was the one thing that put us over the edge. And I always tell that story, for never obviously mentioning names or anything, what state I was in, whatever. But I always mention that story and I say, look, we're not trying to embarrass this person during the intervention. We're trying to be loving and caring so he agrees to go to treatment.
Right.
However, if we get to the end of the day and we're letting off both barrels because now we're trying to save his life. The whole process is saving someone's life. But at the last moment, you need to pull something out of your pocket to say, here, how about this?
What about this? Right.
Right.
So do you ever find, and I'm always curious because I feel like this is what happens on the show. Do you ever find that when you're all sitting in the room, enter in loved one stage right, that they like turn right around and walk right out the door?
I experienced that twice with 2 women, and one guy did it, but it was like midway through the intervention.
No, I'm talking about when they come in, they see everyone, they instantly know what's
They
happening.
instantly know what it is. There's 2 women that I did. They were gone for about 20 minutes, and they came back because they had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So they came back, and we sat down, and we did our intervention. But I tell people that if we get what I call a runner, that means they're going to leave the building. They're leaving your home. So if you're going to leave, I need you to know certain things. Don't come back unless you sit here and talk to us. Because
Okay.
we're not leaving. Okay? So somebody's going to tell them, if you leave here, look at all these people that love and care for you. If you leave here, you're not coming back.
It like jumps to consequence
we're
phase.
we're gonna change the locks when you walk out.
It jumps to consequence phase right away.
Right away.
You let them know
until they come
away.
back, and then we start over with that very loving and caring mentality.
Got it.
But if you're trying to walk out, I got to get you to stay because technically you don't know why we're there. So I got to let you know. We prepare for that during this initial meeting. And just to go back, initial meetings usually happen at night, during the week, or in the morning on a weekend. The reason for that is so no one has to take off from work. Interventions usually happen on a Saturday or a Sunday morning.
I feel like that's always the case. Yeah,
it's usually the case because I can't have people saying, well, no, I can't make it. I got to work. So can you read my letter? Well, I don't mind reading a letter if you live in Texas. I'm going to say this is from your brother who you know is in the military, can't be here. He wrote this. I'm reading this on his behalf. You know what I mean? So, but you can't have half the crowd not being there and me reading more than one letter. Like you have to be there to read your own letter, or at least by speakerphone. Although I don't really like doing that. It has less of an impact. But the initial meetings are usually at night during the week, 7 p.m. or so. And the interventions themselves are usually in the morning on a weekend. I meet with the family to do a pre-intervention meeting to make sure everybody's ready to do this, make sure everybody's calmed down because it's a very emotional thing. And I usually do that about 9 o'clock. And by 10 o'clock, we're ready to go to where the intervention is.
Got it.
Even if we meet in like the back part of a parking lot somewhere at a mall, whatever, and we do that little half hour of preparation, then we go to where the addicted individual is. That's fine too.
Oh, you've done that too? You don't, it's not always I always feel like it's always at the mother's house.
Right. But if the son or daughter or husband is there, then we can't do the pre-intervention meeting there. We have to do it somewhere else. So all I need is 20, 30 minutes to calm everybody down, go over some last minute issues, and then we all go over together. And you don't straggle into the person's home. We all walk in as a group. And the intervention literally starts from the moment you walk in the door.
And then the other thing I'm always so curious about, is there ever a chance that things get a little physically out of hand? Like some pent up emotion or some story that someone brings up, you know, the addicted, the loved one just goes up and goes to punch his uncle right in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Or even you.
We had to call the police. I did an intervention on Long Island once, and we had to call the police. We finished the intervention with the kid in handcuffs.
No kidding.
He agreed to go, and we arranged it. Kid was about 19 at the time. I did one. So a lot of the times you have trouble asking the person to sit with us in this group. You have to do it in a room where everybody can face each other.
Yeah.
You can't do it in, you have to have a room where you can all fit. So on occasion, you'll have a person that doesn't want to go through with this and just wants to go back upstairs or whatever.
They're refusing the process. They're just completely not into it.
They're oblivious. They just want to go back to bed, whatever. So I had this one girl, and I don't mean to laugh, but after years, some of these stories are a little bit comical.
Definitely. I mean, if we can't laugh at it, some of it.
You tell the story, and it's kind of sad when you actually hear it. But this girl didn't want to do this. She was about 25 or so. And she didn't want to do this, so she tried to go back upstairs, up to bed, and her cousin, he was a pretty big kid. He was about 30. He stopped her, and she starts hitting him. So he grabs her and kind of just pins her down so she doesn't punch him more because she was teeing off on him, right? So they're on the steps now. I don't know where this girl got her strength from, but she reached up to the railing going up the steps because she was kind of laying back on her back.
On her back, and he had her like pinned down.
He had her kind of pinned down, but not hurting her.
Right.
Just kind of not letting her move because she was punching the crap out of him. She grabbed grabbed one of the wooden spindles in the railing, ripped it out, and started beating him with it.
No.
I said, where'd this strength come from? You know, in my head.
Yeah.
And then like 2 or 3 other guys that were there kind of broke it up, whatever. We let her cool down a little bit.
You didn't call the police.
And then, no.
Wasn't needed.
No, I would have had somebody been bleeding or whatever. But the cousin was like, I'm fine. Yeah, he was a big kid.
Yeah, he's like, let's
"I'm
keep
fine.
going. He wants,
I'm
yeah.
fine."
Because
He's
he
like,
wants
"We're
her to
here
see
for
her
a
get
reason.
help. Yeah.
We're here for a reason. Let's finish this. Like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So we gathered there and she agreed to go to treatment and, you know, was happily ever after. Like, you know what I mean? And I do keep up with people and, you know, most of them, if not all, I won't say all of them because you never get 100% of anything.
No.
But they maintain their sobriety. And the reason they maintain their sobriety is because the intervention never stops.
Well, yeah.
And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Like, take me, for example. I have a record, no big deal, you know. So if I get arrested again, my record is still with me. So that intervention that the judge had with me on August 14th, 1986, led me to go to treatment on August 15th, 1986. So now, if I go out and go crazy, break the law, go relapse, whatever, I'm going to have to pay a pound of flesh for that.
You think
So
that hasn't been expunged or anything like that?
You know what? Maybe they are expunged.
Yeah.
But I'm really not into finding out.
But in the back of your head,
in the
it's
back of
always
my
there.
head, the intervention, it follows you like a shadow.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If we do an intervention on you and 6 months later you relapse, I tell the family, okay, let's ask him if he wants to go back into treatment. You don't go right to consequences. You say, okay, you fell off your horse. How about this? We get in touch with your sponsor. We get you back into treatment, you know, for at least a little refresher, a couple of weeks. And then, you know, we start over. And a lot of the times they say, okay, I'm willing to do that. If not, we give them the opportunity to go into treatment. We give them the opportunity more than once, okay? If they, at the end of the day, they don't want to get, at the end of the, you know, couple days, whatever we give them to change their mind, if they don't want to, then all the original consequences that you planned at the intervention go into effect. And I've talked to many people over the years and say to me, yeah, we did an intervention last year and it didn't work, so that's why we're calling you. And I'm like, what do you mean it didn't work? Yeah, we had this guy come in and we read letters and, you know, he didn't want to go to treatment and that was it. And we paid a lot of money for that. I'm like, oh my God. What? And I hate hearing that.
Same.
But that's a non-professional because at the end of the day, if your loved one doesn't want to go to treatment, that's fine. It's his or her choice. But it's your choice if you want to live with it. So now that person has to live with the consequences of not going to treatment. Now, let's say you do go to treatment. Let's say a year ago, that interventionist was successful, went to treatment, whatever, and the guy relapsed 3 months later. Why didn't he instruct you on what to do if a relapse arose?
I feel like it picks up right where it left off, doesn't it?
The addiction picks up right where it left off. The intervention should also pick up where it left off. And you need to confront the person in a loving way and say, look, we did treatment. You were doing so good. You relapsed. It's only been a week, but let's get you back in for a refresher so we can get you back going. You can't get tangled up in this again. If he says, F you, I'm going to have to do it. Well, guess what? Now I'm going to pack everything you own, which ain't much, and put it out front. And if you don't like it, whatever, let's go back to treatment. That's the alternative. The consequences go in effect and they have the same amount of punch that they did a year earlier.
Well, this all kind of goes into this other thought or notion that I've had in working with you and seeing other interventionists work is that once you pay an interventionist, you know, once you contract or hire an interventionist, a good interventionist is with you for life, right?
I always tell people I am, you know, I have a lifetime warranty. And they're like, what the hell? I have a lifetime warranty, meaning you hired me, use me as much as you want. And usually it's for help post-treatment. Like, I'm working my butt off for this intervention with the education, the meetings, everything up to and including the day of the intervention and arranging treatment, everything you should do as an interventionist. But if you need me 3 months later, I want to be available for you 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later. You may have to say, hey, this is Joe Blow. You did an intervention on my wife 6 months ago. You may have to jog my memory, but I'll know exactly. Oh, you were the one in such and such a city. And then, I remember. What could I do for you? And you give them as much time as they need to get their problem out in the open and to help them resolve their issue. Yeah. You paid for the service, basically, and you should use the service.
I also find more often than not that the interventionist needs to get involved while the loved one is in treatment.
Oh, yeah.
Because in that first week, you and I both know, people are going to say anything they can to get out, to not engage, right? Because that's the hardest point in time, right? That's the most physically jarring part of of getting sober. And they will call their loved one and say, Mom, there's cockroaches here.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
I'm
X,
living
Y, and Z.
in a closet.
I got a straight jacket on.
Yeah.
All these things, right?
There's criminals roaming around.
But you vetted the facility already.
Of course.
Always. You know it's not the case.
I totally vet the facility. I want to know what their therapist qualifications are. I want to know. I usually tour facilities all over the country to vet them.
Yeah.
And I've toured, we're here in the think tank in Sewell, New Jersey. I've toured every treatment center in the area just in case we need to stay local. So I know they're not keeping you in a closet. I know they're not feeding you.
Yeah.
I know everything is up to par. So basically that comes hand in hand with that initial meeting too. Your loved ones may try to get out of treatment early. I did it myself.
Oh yeah, everyone does. Especially that for, I hate to use this language, but especially the first time you go to treatment.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I find more people than not these days it takes multiple episodes in treatment to get it in today's world, unfortunately.
Sometimes, but it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
Because if you have consequences to a relapse, you're approaching it with a different mindset.
Definitely. Oh yeah.
And that's why when you do an intervention, it's actually better for the addict or alcoholic and the family. The family gets educated. The alcoholic or addict goes to treatment. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
Now, when they get to treatment, then you're working with the family to educate them on what they need to do while their loved one is in treatment.
It's such an amazing process to have, I think, a liaison that can get involved in every step of this process, really just to educate the family, to manage what their expectations look like. I can't tell you how many families I've talked to that think that treatment is something that it's not. They think that their loved one's going to come back and all of a sudden want to go get their PhD and do all these crazy things.
Yeah.
When recovering is really
it's a full-time job for a little while.
It's, you're not, sometimes I'll say you may not even see a change in them for the first 2 years. You know what I mean? It's hard to find gratitude. It's hard to find connection to a higher power. It's hard to follow the suggestions that are suggested to us, right?
That's in the worst cases. I believe that not everybody's like that. I believe if you come out and do the right thing, which is the 12 steps with a sponsor, going to meetings, whatever, your chance of freeing yourself from that mentality are way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
I couldn't agree more.
Way better. You have to be willing. And to be willing, sometimes you need consequences. So now I should go to meetings because I don't want to screw up and live on the street. I should do this. I should do that. And it makes breaking through that barrier a little easier. And I always tell people, I went to treatment one time. You don't have to go to treatment over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
If you have consequences for screwing up, and you really care about those consequences, you're going to get it right on the first try.
Definitely.
And again, not everybody gets it right on the first try. As a matter of fact, hardly anybody does.
Very rare.
But the thing is, if you pick a good treatment center that's right for that person, again, not all treatment centers are alike. I say this all the time. Some are better than others. If you're dealing with, let's say, a military veteran who saw active combat in the Gulf, well, I can't put you in a treatment center down the street.
Definitely
I need
not.
something that's going to treat your trauma. So now if I hone it down to the right treatment center, now that's even more of a success story coming out because they're working on trauma, they're working on everything in that treatment center. The place down the street might not have that service.
Yeah.
So you have to vet the treatment center and see, like, because I'm looking at the person, the addicted individual, and I'm figuring out from his family what's going on, what he has going on inside, that sort of thing. Like, you never know what you're dealing with.
Much. No, and there is so much more to it these days than there used to be.
But you want to place them where they belong, not in reference to their zip code.
Oh, definitely not. No, I've over the last few years, and it's, not to share too much about myself. There was a point in time where I would have told you that going to treatment local to your house was the best possible thing to do. And my opinion on that has very much changed in the last 3 years. I find that when the addicted one, when the loved one goes to treatment further away, there's something about them that just takes it more seriously. You know what I mean? Probably because they don't recognize where they are. They don't know the people that they're with.
Exactly.
I would go to treatment regularly and run into people that I knew.
Of course you would.
And it was a
You're in the
recipe for
neighborhood,
disaster.
for God's sakes.
Listen, I was probably 25 miles from my house, but even still, it was where we went. It was where everyone went.
Exactly.
I saw people that I used with. I saw people that I grew up
and
with.
And that's why people go in and out of treatment, because they just keep going back to the same spot.
Same local spot.
It's like that's the definition of insanity.
It is.
Trying something, trying it again, and figuring you're going to have a different outcome.
And it creates like bad culture within centers. It kind of turns them into like these dens. You know what I mean?
That's
where
right.
People just
They're just
go
housing people
when they need, you know, good heat and a nice bed and a meal.
I did an intervention on a woman that went to treatment 52 times.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous. She could have ran the sessions.
I'm sure.
And
What, to the same couple places?
She went to the same couple places. They all knew her. Oh, the so-and-so's back. Okay. I placed her somewhere 1,500 miles from her house. And she finally got it. But it took a while.
It did. And you never know. That's why I say divine intervention. You never know when that day is going to come where someone's just ready to listen. You know what I mean?
That's right.
It's a magical thing.
It is absolutely magical. And this was definitely a topic that I could talk for 2 more hours on.
Same.
And I know we're gonna touch on intervention again in one of our podcasts in the future. But we're kind of getting to the end of the show.
Yeah.
And
this was
really
incredible,
appreciate.
brother.
What's that?
This was incredible. I feel like you and I talk on the phone if not every other day, you know what I mean?
Sure.
About whatever, and just learning more about your history and what kind of makes you the recovering man that you are is just really interesting,
I appreciate it. I mean, I try to use my experience to help people, you know what I mean? And becoming a registered interventionist is one of those things that it was just the next step for me.
Definitely.
To add this to my repertoire of helping people.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, listen, we're Tenacious Recovery. I'd like to thank my man Vinny over here, interventionist extraordinaire, for coming on and sharing a little bit more about himself. You got to be tenacious about your recovery.
If you want to stay sober. That's right, Sam. My name's Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
And God willing, we'll see y'all soon.